The great eagle soared freely in the sky, while Yi Chen prepared something on the table outside. The wooden door cracked open, and Elder Zhang stepped out, remarking that the young man had risen early. Yi Chen, holding a plate with 3 pork buns, explained that he had been unable to sleep and had risen ahead of time. Elder Zhang praised his diligence, calling it rare to see such effort, while Yi Chen smiled in response and replied with modesty. Suddenly, Hua shouted loudly, calling out to his grandfather. His body became surrounded by qi as he exclaimed in confusion, asking what was happening to him and describing the warm current flowing through his body. Elder Zhang turned in surprise, his eyes widening as he recognized it to be spirit qi. Rushing over to check his grandson, he questioned how such a thing had occurred. Hua stammered in disbelief, asking if he could truly cultivate. Elder Zhang lifted him up with joy, confirming excitedly that he indeed could. Yi Chen stepped forward and patted Hua on the shoulder, declaring that from this day onward, he was a cultivator. Hua's face lit up with an even brighter smile as he shouted in delight. The great eagle joined in the celebration, and Hua shouted again, proclaiming to the great eagle that he was now a cultivator and could protect it in the future. Looking on with radiant joy beside Yi Chen, Elder Zhang declared with heartfelt emotion that heaven truly had eyes. But as the others continued to celebrate, Yi Chen lowered his gaze in silence. His thoughts weighed heavily, questioning whether this path was truly good for Hua. He reflected that the journey of cultivation was far more difficult than that of an ordinary man. Though cultivation promised a longer lifespan, it also carried with it loneliness and cruelty. He wondered if he had done right or wrong in changing Hua's fate so suddenly. Perhaps, when the boy truly understood the hardships of cultivation, he would realize that the life of an ordinary man was far more free and easy than that of a cultivator. Moments later, when Yi Chen returned to the sect, the disciples nearby cried out in disbelief. They had witnessed him endure more than 100 strikes of the fire whip, yet he now appeared completely unharmed. Shocked voices spread among them, calling him a monster, astonished that not a single scar remained on his body and remarking on how little time had passed since the punishment. Even so, their attention soon shifted. Urgency rippled through the crowd as word spread that the disciples of Rinyang Peak and Tianyang Peak were once again clashing on the Fengyun stage. Excited voices rose that this time, even disciples of the Foundation Establishment stage had joined the fray, and that the disciples of Diang Peak had gone to participate as well. As they walked past him, he let out a soft laugh upon realizing that not a single disciple remained behind. Everyone had gone to see the commotion. He continued on, remarking to himself that such stillness was rare and welcome. He made his way into the Sect's library. Upon arrival, he bowed in greeting to the elder who oversaw the entrance. The elder instructed him to step inside and leave his jade tablet, and Yi Chen responded respectfully before complying. Lifting his gaze, he looked up at the seemingly endless shelves that stretched into the heights above. He let out a breath as he took in the vast collection. 3 hours later, after returning a book, he exhaled again, noting that the profound arts appeared to be stored on the upper levels. Examining the scroll in his hand, he reflected on the limits of his current status. At Hengyu Sect, outer sect disciples were permitted to enter only the first floor of the library. As for the upper floors, with his current qualifications, he had no right to ascend. A sudden loud voice rang out, breaking Yi Chen's focus as someone shouted, calling out to old man Huangxi and asking if he was missed. Another voice answered sharply, warning the speaker that if he stole something again, he would be beaten. Eavesdropping as he listened in, Yi Chen looked flabbergasted and wondered what that person had eaten to grow so large. The fat guy retorted indignantly, questioning the accusation and insisting he was not that kind of person. The other voice roared back, telling him to get out. As Yi Chen walked past, still reading, he remarked with what seemed like sarcasm that Hengyu truly had many talented people. Just as those words left his mouth, the fat guy suddenly turned his attention toward him. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, the boy stared and asked why he had never seen him before. Yi Chen replied in a blank tone that he was new. The boy gave a knowing sound, as though confirming his suspicion, and began to leave. Yi Chen exhaled in relief. Yet just as he was leaving, the fat kid halted abruptly. His gaze swung back to Yi Chen, and he narrowed his eyes with curiosity. Yi Chen shifted uncomfortably as the fat kid stepped closer, sniffing eagerly around him, moving left and right. Suddenly, the boy's eyes lit up with excitement, and he exclaimed that Yi Chen possessed true fire. Yi Chen's expression grew troubled. The fat kid darted glances in every direction, lowering his voice to ask if it was true. Yi Chen's body stiffened with nervousness, and the thought surfaced within him that neither the first seat of the three main peaks nor Zhou Dafu, the caretaker of the weapon pavilion, had managed to notice. Yet this chubby youth in front of him had somehow sniffed it out. Forcing a strained explanation, he insisted that true fire was far too precious, and that an outer disciple like himself could not possibly have it. The fat kid refused to believe him, claiming that he could smell it clearly. Yi Chen countered that he must have sniffed wrong. The boy barked back that it was impossible, threatening to find someone else to test it. He spun around abruptly and called out to old man Huang, declaring that this kid possessed true, only for Yi Chen to rush forward and clamp a hand over his mouth, muffling the words. With his palm still pressed against the boy's cheek, Yi Chen muttered in frustration that the little fatty was full of wicked ideas and that all his bulk must have been grown from them. The fat kid pried his hand away, triumphantly declaring that this proved his claim. Yi Chen exhaled sharply and, unable to deny it further, conceded with irritation. Elder Huang approached at that moment, demanding to know what the shouting was about. The fat kid scrambled to reply that he was merely practicing his voice. Elder Huang gave him a bored look, asking if he had nothing better to do, before warning him to be quiet. As the elder turned to leave, he suddenly paused and asked what the boy had meant earlier about true something. Yi Chen quickly tried to appear innocent, while the fat kid, with annoyance, changed his words and claimed he had meant true qi. Elder Huang struck him across the head, cursing at his nonsense. The boy yelped in pain, while Elder Huang scolded that everyone in Hengyue Sect had true qi and there was nothing to make a fuss over, before strolling away. The fat kid sat on the ground, wiping his cheek and cursing the old man under his breath, vowing revenge. Then, glancing up, he noticed Yi Chen attempting to slip away quietly. He immediately shouted after him, forbidding him to leave. Yi Chen turned back reluctantly, asking what else the boy wanted. The fat kid grabbed hold of his leg, begging him to refine a treasure with his true fire. Yi Chen refused flatly, claiming he had no time, but the boy instantly threatened to call for old man Huang again. Yi Chen's expression drained of color, and he quickly relented, blurting out that he would help. Before committing, he laid down his terms, saying he would refine only one treasure and that the boy must swear to never reveal his true fire to anyone. The fat kid chuckled slyly and assured him that his mouth was tightly sealed. Yi Chen then added another condition. He would not refine for free, demanding 500 spirit stones as payment. Without hesitation, the fat kid accepted the deal. Both of them soon stood before an iron club impaled in the ground, their eyes fixed on the weapon. The fat kid called attention to it, declaring that there was a trace of black qi lingering on its surface. Yi Chen studied it and questioned what it was. The fat kid explained that the wolf's teeth club still carried the evil thoughts of its previous owner, and because of that, it refused to acknowledge him as its master. At that, Yi Chen echoed the words in surprise, his gaze steady on the weapon. His mind turned over the realization that the evil thoughts accumulated over a lifetime were still clinging to the club. He measured what that implied. The strength of the original owner must have been formidable, and the wolf's teeth club itself was certainly no ordinary weapon. Breaking his contemplation, he asked if true fire could truly refine it. The fat kid, answering without hesitation, affirmed it with certainty, explaining that all evil thoughts belonged to the yin, and nothing was more feared by yin than a force of pure yang. True fire, born from heaven and earth, was the perfect counter. With that settled, they decided to begin at once. Soon after, Yi Chen released his true fire, enveloping the club in its blaze. The fat boy watched eagerly, marveling at the sight, calling the flames extraordinary and declaring that they would surely refine the black qi. As wisps of the evil aura began to dissipate, he crowed triumphantly that it was happening just as he had said. Chen kept his focus, carefully controlling the true fire while noting that the evil thoughts were deeply rooted and would take time to fully cleanse. The boy reassured him with ease that he had plenty of time to wait. As the refining continued, the boy casually introduced himself, saying his name was Bear 2. Chen repeated the name with surprise, and the boy explained that he was the second child of his family, so his father had named him Bear 2. Chen asked then about his elder brother's name, and the boy answered that it was Big Bear. Chen pressed further, asking if the youngest sibling was named Bear 3, but Bear 2 replied that he had no younger brother. As the refinement continued, Bear 2 watched the club intently, announcing that they were almost finished. When the last aura of evil thoughts finally dissipated, Bear 2 exclaimed with satisfaction that the process was complete. He examined his newly purified club with approval, noting that it was not bad at all. Bear 2 then demonstrated the club's capabilities by commanding it to get bigger, and the weapon expanded in size. Chen observed Bear 2 holding the giant club, remarking that if swung like a bat, few people could withstand its power. In a good mood, Bear 2 offered to buy Chen a drink. Chen gave him a doubtful look, suspecting that Bear 2 intended not to pay. Bear 2 smiled, suggesting that since they got along well, talking about money would hurt their feelings. Bear 2 then hugged Chen with a profiteer's expression, proposing that they make a huge deal together, noting Chen's possession of true fire. However, Chen simply demanded that he pay up. Bear 2 countered by asking if Chen lacked ice jade orchid, then revealed that the elder guarding the spirit grass garden was his uncle, clearly attempting to pique Chen's interest. Moments later, in front of the gate of what appeared to be the Ling Cow garden, Chen asked Bear 2 if their plan would work. Bear 2 responded with complete confidence that it would definitely succeed. From inside a nearby house, a voice called out with a mixture of complaint and laughter. As Chen and Bear 2 drew closer to the house, the voice continued, telling someone to hold it. Chen remarked that Bear 2's uncle must be very hardworking, but Bear 2 looked confused, noting that the voice didn't sound like his aunt's. Bear 2 called out "Uncle" from outside the house. The voice from inside urgently instructed someone to hurry up and put on their clothes. The door slowly opened, revealing two heads, a girl and a boy, peeking out to see who had arrived. The boy recognized Bear 2, addressing him as Fatty Bear. He then turned to his female companion, telling her to go back first. The girl responded shyly in agreement. As she walked past Bear 2, he confronted the boy, calling him Lee Sanner and questioning his bravery, asking if he wasn't afraid of Bear 2's uncle beating him. Bear 2 added that people who didn't know better might think this was a brothel. Sanner explained that the master had gone roaming around and nobody knew when he would return. He mentioned that he had been lonely, so he had found a companion. As the girl passed by Chen, she gave him a wink and greeted him. Bear 2 asked for confirmation about his uncle's departure, and Sanner verified that it had happened half a month ago. Bear 2 looked at the yawning Sanner and commented that this made things easier. He then took out his club and swung it at Sanner's face, sending one of Sanner's teeth flying. Chen watched in horror, questioning if this violent approach was how Bear 2 planned to obtain the spirit grass. While looking at Sanner's sprawled body on the ground, Chen remarked that this was robbery. Bear 2 dismissed the charge, insisting that whether they stole or robbed, what mattered was securing the spirit grass. If blame was to fall, he declared it would either be on him or on Sanner. He went on to argue that if they did not take too much, with so much spirit grass here, it would go unnoticed. Hearing this, Chen muttered that it felt as though he had boarded a pirate ship, but Bear 2 urged him not to bother with the fallen Sanner and to move on. By the time night settled over the garden, what greeted Chen left him deeply surprised. Spirit grass of this kind was nearly impossible to find even if one searched the entire back mountain, yet here, countless rows of ice jade orchids lay before him, neatly spread and waiting to be harvested. The sight stirred thoughts within him that if all of these orchids were refined into spirit jade liquid, the wealth they could gain would be beyond measure. Standing ahead, Bear 2 shouted for him to stop staring in a daze and start plucking. Chen rushed forward, hurrying to catch up. He plucked the ice jade orchids one by one, placing them into a sack. As the two continued, Bear 2 warned him not to gather only from one area, saying it would be too obvious. Chen replied with confidence that he understood, yet Bear 2 retorted that despite his claim, Chen had already left one section bare from overharvesting. Time passed as they worked, until their sacks were filled with orchids. Bear 2 decided it was enough and called for their withdrawal. Chen placed his hands on his waist and exhaled in agreement. He then enveloped the bulging sack with his chi, shrinking it back to his possession. Suddenly, Bear 2 muttered that his eyes wouldn't stop twitching and urged a quick departure. Chen responded with agreement, and the two prepared to depart. Just then, Chen noticed his true fire suddenly vibrating, which indicated the presence of a treasure nearby. However, Bear 2's urgent insistence prompted him to abandon the investigation, and he quickly acknowledged that he was coming. Almost immediately, Bear 2 noticed a figure flying toward them in the distance and muttered in dismay that his uncle had returned. As his uncle landed directly before them, Bear 2 began to sweat profusely, inwardly lamenting the profoundly unfortunate timing of his uncle's arrival on this of all nights. He then bowed nervously and formally greeted his uncle. His uncle immediately questioned why Bear 2 was wandering the spirit grass garden at such a late hour. Visibly nervous, Bear 2 fabricated an excuse, claiming that his father intended to marry another young woman and that he had come to deliver a wedding invitation. The uncle appeared both angered and shocked by this news. Without another word, he flew away at high speed while shouting that Xingdahai must be tired of living. Bear 2 grew increasingly uncomfortable as he watched him leave. He then turned toward Chen and demanded to know what he was waiting for, instructing him to leave immediately. As they walked away together, Chen asked whether Bear 2 was not concerned about his father seeking retribution for the lie. Bear 2 replied that it was of little consequence since he was beaten up every day anyway. To this, Chen had no response. Returning to Chen's secret cave, Bear 2 observed the pile of spirit jade orchids and remarked that the quantity exceeded 900 plants, indicating they would yield substantial profit. He suggested processing all of them into spirit jade liquid and splitting the proceeds equally, to which Chen agreed. As the bonfire flickered, Chen mentioned requiring additional ingredients besides the orchids. Bear 2 explained that while the other components were easily obtainable, they were located in the back mountain, necessitating an immediate search despite the late hour. Chen affirmed the plan, and they proceeded to scour the mountains through the night. After some time, both collapsed to the ground from exhaustion, with Bear 2 openly expressing his fatigue. However, they soon regained their motivation, mentally preparing themselves with renewed determination. Bear 2 invoked their goal of producing the spirit jade liquid, urging them to continue working, and Chen agreed to proceed. Chen then enveloped the spirit jade orchids within his true fire as Bear 2 observed the process. 9 days later, as morning light illuminated the mountains, one of them exclaimed that the task was finally complete. Chen, surrounded by numerous bottles, announced that the work was done. On the other side, Bear 2 breathed heavily from the exertion. Bear 2 mentioned a question he had long intended to ask. He noted that Chen possessed true fire, a treasure any sect would highly value, and questioned why Chen had only become an intern disciple. Chen responded with an idiom, explaining that while a gentleman is innocent, possessing a precious jade ring becomes a crime. He elaborated that revealing his true fire would inevitably provoke envy and attract unnecessary trouble, hence his decision to conceal it. He further stated that he did not intend to reveal his true fire before strangers until he had grown sufficiently powerful. Bear 2 then informed him that the outer sect competition would occur in 1 month, adding that gaining entry to the inner sect without using his true fire would be challenging. Lost in thought, Chen murmured quietly about the outer sect competition. Bear too dusted himself off as he got up and announced his departure, explaining that his father might be looking for him. Chen acknowledged this with a simple affirmation. Watching Bear too depart, Chen returned to his thoughts, considering that the Hengyu sect should operate similarly to the Zhengyang sect, holding an outer sect competition every 3 years where only those who endured until the end could enter the inner sect. He reflected that it had been more than a month since his expulsion from the Zhengyang sect, and had he still been there, he would have already entered its inner sect. He then began cultivating, contemplating how circumstances in the world were ever-changing. He continued his reflections, recalling how he had been abandoned by his previous sect and humiliated, but noted that Providence was fair and had given him a second chance to shine within the Hengyu sect. As the true fire continued to envelop him, Chen roared in triumph upon reaching the qi condensation 5th stage. His eyes burned with determination as he opened them, before closing them once more. He noted that for his next breakthrough, he would require at least 100 bottles of spirit jade liquid. It was explained that the qi condensation 5th stage served as the dividing line within the qi condensation realm. The first 4 stages were not especially difficult to break through, but starting from the 5th stage, the power gaps grew significantly larger. Progressing to the next realm would be many times harder, as the volume of the divine sea was vastly greater than that of the meridians, making advancement extremely challenging. Chen wiped his forehead and expressed his gratitude for possessing the true fire, which enabled him to produce spirit jade liquid. He reflected that, otherwise, had he been forced to rely solely on absorbing the energy of heaven and earth, it would have been impossible to say when he might have broken through again. Suddenly, Chen noticed a faint glow emanating from within his garment. Reaching inside, he retrieved the gourd he had purchased earlier. As he removed the cork, its mouth began to glow with increasing intensity. Chen stared in astonishment as the gourd began swallowing the surrounding energy, creating a visible vortex at its opening. He realized it possessed the ability to store spirit qi. While observing it continue to absorb more energy, Chen confirmed that the spirit qi outside the cave was indeed overflowing. He peered inside the gourd and saw a glowing energy within, expressing disbelief at its capability. Without hesitation, he drank the contents. Staring at the gourd afterward with amazement, he noted that the liquid was no less effective than spirit jade liquid, concluding that his expenditure of 1,300 spirit stones had not been wasted. He considered that in the future, he could simply place the little purple gold gourd in any location abundant with spirit qi, where it would independently absorb energy and convert it into liquid form. Chen declared it a true treasure, thinking that although the gourd transformed heaven and earth qi slowly, if left undisturbed during absorption, it would accumulate a substantial amount over time. Most importantly, he realized he would no longer need to waste time refining jade liquid. As Chen returned to the spiritual herb garden, he noticed Hua deeply engaged in cultivation, prompting him to remark on what a hard-working young disciple he was. Sensing Chen's presence, Hua opened his eyes and addressed him as Big Brother. Greeting Chen with a smile, Hua expressed genuine happiness at his return. When Chen inquired how he felt, Hua responded enthusiastically that he felt wonderful, noting he was full of energy and that his appetite had grown significantly. Chen stated with confidence that Hua would continue to grow stronger in the future. He then produced 2 bottles of spirit jade liquid and presented them to Hua, instructing him to take 3 drops every hour while emphasizing that 3 drops represented the absolute limit and warning him not to exceed this amount under any circumstances. Hua expressed his gratitude to his big brother. Chen told him to return once he had finished both bottles, which Hua affirmed with great enthusiasm. Hua then asked whether he might be permitted to go to Spirit Mountain to cultivate alongside Chen. Yi Chen paused without immediately responding, causing Hua to look downward while explaining that he merely wished to see the world above. After a moment of contemplation, Yi Chen placed his hand on Hua's shoulder and told him to prepare himself, as he would take him up the mountain the following day. Hua questioned whether this was truly happening, to which Yi Chen urged him to go and get ready. Yi Chen sighed as he watched Hua celebrating while walking away, inwardly wondering whether helping Hua become a cultivator was ultimately the right or wrong decision. In the following morning, a voice instructed Hua to remain well-behaved while practicing on the mountain. Elder Zhang continued, advising him to stay out of trouble and return without delay. When Yi Chen entered the herb garden, he reassured the elder, saying there was no need for concern and promising that he would look after Hua. The scene shifted to the Hengyu Sect's spirit mountain, where Hua stood before the long staircase, staring at it in open amazement. A sudden voice broke the moment, making him tense. A disciple demanded to know why Yi Chen had brought him up the mountain, accusing them of disregarding the rules. Another disciple immediately countered, calling the first one blind and pointing out that the boy clearly carried true qi fluctuations within his body. Startled, the first disciple admitted his surprise that Hua could now cultivate, calling the development unprecedented. As the exchange went on, Hua grew increasingly uneasy. Noticing this, Yi Chen crouched down beside him to offer comfort, telling him not to be afraid. Hua answered that he was not actually scared. Upon entering the 9 clear pavilions, the elder addressed Yi Chen, admitting that he had previously misjudged him. Yi Chen replied that the elder must be joking. He then introduced Hua to the elder, explaining that the boy was there to obtain an identity card. The elder expressed interest in this request. After checking Hua with his qi, the elder informed him that he could only become an outer disciple at first. The elder asked whether Hua would be willing to accept this arrangement. Hua eagerly agreed, addressing the elder respectfully and stating that as long as he could practice on the mountain, he would accept any conditions. When Hua received his jade tablet and a pouch, he thanked the elder profusely. Yi Chen then bowed to the elder and asked to be excused. Before they could leave, the elder called out to ask whether Yi Chen would be willing to become his disciple after his fieldwork expired. Yi Chen turned back to respond, thanking the elder for his appreciation and stating that he would consider the offer when his fieldwork concluded. The elder replied that he would wait for Yi Chen's answer. Just as they were preparing to leave, a voice called out to remark on what a small world it was. The familiar person continued by expressing that he seemed to encounter trash everywhere. Yi Chen immediately recognized the speaker as Chi Hao, who then questioned whether the fire whip had ultimately failed to kill him. The young boy standing beside Chi Hao smiled mockingly while stating how weak Hua appeared to be, causing Hua to begin crying. Yi Chen directly addressed Chi Hao, declaring that he would be waiting for him the following day at the Feng Yun stage. Turning his attention to Hua, Yi Chen suggested they proceed to the Spirit Weapon Pavilion to select a weapon for him. Hua expressed that he had once again embarrassed Yi Chen, adding that the boy named Qi Yun seemed much better than him in every aspect. Yi Chen placed his hand on Hua's head and explained that Qi Yun was obviously a disciple from a wealthy family who had been supplied with various elixirs since birth. He stated that such individuals appeared superior simply because they were better born, while emphasizing that Hua had just become a cultivator and still had considerable progress to make. When Hua questioned whether he truly belonged on the mountain, Yi Chen advised him to take things as they came while they continued walking. He explained that although the world was divided between the strong and the weak, providence remained ultimately fair. He pointed out that being somewhat inferior at present didn't mean Hua would remain so forever, reminding him that Yi Chen himself had been looked down upon when he first arrived. Hua affirmed that he would redouble his efforts and never disgrace his big brother again. The narrative contextualized that there was no shortage of cultivation families in Great Chu, including the Shangyuan family in Dongyu, the Sidu family in Zishu, the Qi family in Nanjiang, and the Wang family in Baikyuan. Both Qi Hao and the young Qi Yun were scions of the Qi family in Nanjiang. Although cultivation families lacked the deep roots of major sects, they still wielded significant influence. Their disciples had been soaked in elixir baths since youth, and with this substantial advantage alone, most ordinary sect disciples could not hope to compete with them. Upon reaching the spirit weapon pavilion and paying proper respect to the elder, Elder Zhou instructed Hua to proceed inside while explaining he could select only one weapon. Yi Chen encouraged Hua to move forward, suggesting he choose a convenient weapon for the present while promising to find him a superior one in the future. Hua agreed with enthusiasm. Meanwhile, as Elder Zhou was yawning, Yi Chen inquired whether he might have black steel and black iron available. He considered that refining the essence of these materials into the Red Heaven sword would be ideal, since black iron provided hardness while black steel offered flexibility, making them the perfect combination according to weapon refinement art. The narrative noted that black iron and black steel represented valuable refining materials that had always been priceless and could only be discovered through fortunate circumstance. Elder Zhou, wiping his eye, acknowledged that while these materials were indeed precious, he did possess some, though he expressed concern that Yi Chen might not be able to afford them. When Yi Chen inquired about the price, the elder raised a single finger. Yi Chen asked whether this meant 10,000, but Elder Zhou corrected him by stating it was 100,000, which he considered cheap compared to Pang Dahai's Wanbao Pavilion, where it sold at higher prices. He further explained that 100,000 spirit stones would only suffice for a piece of black iron or black steel, approximately the size of an egg. Upon hearing this, Yi Chen could only smile outwardly, while inwardly reflecting that 100,000 spirit stones represented an enormous sum. He noted that for outer sect disciples, even working for the sect their entire lives might only allow them to save such an amount. And even with his ability to refine spirit jade liquid, it would require considerable time to accumulate 100,000 spirit stones. However, the elder then continued by mentioning there was a place that sold these materials very cheaply. When Yi Chen asked where, Elder Zhou revealed it was the Yuming black market. Yi Chen smiled as he privately realized he had forgotten about that particular place.